Emily had always dreamed of owning her own house, and finally, after years of hard work and saving, she had made it a reality. She found a charming old home on the outskirts of town that was in need of some renovations, but she saw the potential and decided to take the plunge. As she began to tear down the old wallpaper and strip the paint from the walls, Emily discovered something unexpected. Behind one of the walls, she found an old, tattered diary. The pages were yellowed with age, and the leather binding was cracked and worn. It was clear that the diary had been hidden in the walls for years, and Emily couldn't resist the urge to read it. As she pored over the pages, Emily discovered that the diary belonged to the previous owner of the house, a woman named Sarah. The diary entries were cryptic and often unsettling, describing strange rituals and practices that Emily couldn't quite make sense of. But the more she read, the more she became intrigued by the mysterious woman who had lived in the house before her. Emily found herself drawn to the diary and began spending all of her free time reading it. She started to become obsessed with Sarah and the strange cult that she seemed to be a part of. But as she delved deeper into the diary, Emily began to feel a creeping sense of unease. The more she learned about the cult and its practices, the more she felt like she was being watched. One night, Emily woke up to a strange noise coming from the walls. It sounded like scratching and tapping, and it seemed to be coming from the exact spot where she had found the diary. Emily tried to dismiss it as her imagination, but the noise continued every night, growing louder and more persistent. As the days went by, Emily's obsession with the diary and the cult grew stronger, but so did her fear. She started to feel like she was being followed, and strange things began happening in the house. Doors would open and close on their own, and she would sometimes hear footsteps coming from empty rooms. Emily began to suspect that the cult was still active, and that they were targeting her. But she couldn't stop reading the diary, even though she knew it was only fueling her paranoia. She felt like she was on the brink of discovering something important, something that would help her unravel the mystery of the cult and its connection to her new home. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the diary, something she wasn't seeing. She started to feel like the pages were talking to her, and that she was meant to uncover a hidden message. She spent hours poring over the entries, trying to find a clue that would lead her to the truth. One night, as Emily was reading the diary, she noticed something strange. There was a pattern to the entries, a repetition of certain phrases and words. She felt like she was on the verge of a breakthrough, and she stayed up all night deciphering the code. Finally, she cracked it. The diary was a journal of sorts, chronicling the life of Sarah and her involvement in the cult. But it was also a warning, a message to anyone who found it. Sarah had hidden the diary in the walls because she knew that the cult would come after her if they found out she was planning to leave. And now, Emily realized with a sinking feeling, they might come after her too. Emily felt a sense of dread wash over her. She knew she had to be careful, but she also couldn't ignore the feeling that she was meant to do something with the diary, something that would help her uncover the truth and put a stop to the cult once and for all. As Emily continued to read the diary, she uncovered more and more disturbing details about the cult and its practices. She learned about their rituals, their symbols, and their beliefs. And she began to realize that they were not just a harmless group of people with strange ideas. They were dangerous, and they would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. Emily knew she had to be careful, but she also couldn't resist the urge to find out more. She became increasingly isolated and paranoid, spending all of her time in the house and barely leaving for days at a time. She knew she was in danger, but she also knew that she was the only one who could put a stop to the cult's sinister plans. The diary had become an obsession for Emily, but it was also her only hope. She had to find a way to stop the cult before it was too late, and she was willing to risk everything to do it. Emily's obsession with the diary and the cult only grew stronger, and she began to delve deeper into the mysteries it contained. She spent hours researching the cult and its beliefs online, trying to find any information she could that might help her understand what she was up against. But the more she learned, the more terrified she became. She discovered that the cult was much larger and more powerful than she had originally thought, with connections that reached far beyond her small town. And she realized that she was in way over her head. Emily knew that she needed help, but she didn't know who to turn to. She was too scared to involve the police, afraid that they wouldn't believe her or that they might be involved with the cult themselves. She was all alone, trapped in her own house with the diary and the cult secrets. As the days went by, Emily's fear and paranoia continued to grow. She barely slept, spending her nights listening for any sign of the cult's presence. And then, one night, she heard something that made her blood run cold. It was a knock at the door, but when Emily looked through the peephole, she saw no one. She opened the door and found nothing but darkness outside. Emily was scared, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She decided to take action. Emily started to board up the windows and lock the doors, turning her home into a fortress. She stopped answering her phone and refused to open the door to anyone, no matter who they were. Emily's obsession had taken over her life, and she was consumed with the idea of stopping the cult at all costs. But as she barricaded herself inside her home, she knew that time was running out. The cult was closing in on her, and she had no idea how to stop them. But as the days passed, Emily started to feel like she was making progress. She found a group of online researchers who had been tracking the cult for years, and she started to collaborate with them. They shared information and theories, and Emily began to feel like she wasn't alone in her fight. As she worked with the group, Emily uncovered more and more about the cult's activities. She learned about their plans for a ritual that would take place in just a few weeks, and she realized that it was her last chance to stop them. Emily knew that she couldn't do it alone. She had to find someone who could help her take down the cult and stop their sinister plans. And then she remembered the man who had sold her the house. She went through the paperwork she had received when she bought the house, and she found the man's name and address. Emily decided to pay him a visit, hoping that he might have some information that could help her. When she arrived at the man's house, she found him sitting on his front porch, smoking a cigarette. He looked up when she approached, and his eyes widened in surprise. "Emily," he said, clearly taken aback. "What are you doing here?" Emily took a deep breath and explained everything to the man. She told him about the diary, the cult, and her efforts to stop them. The man listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. Finally, when Emily had finished her story, the man spoke. "I know more than you think," he said, his voice low and ominous. "But you need to be careful. The cult is not to be trifled with. They will stop at nothing to achieve their goals." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She realized that she was in even deeper trouble than she had thought. But she also knew that she couldn't give up. She had come too far, and too much was at stake. "I need your help," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I can't do this alone." The man looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll help you," he said. "But we have to be careful. We have to work together, and we have to stay one step ahead of the cult." Emily felt a sense of relief wash over her. She knew that she couldn't do this alone, and she was grateful to have someone on her side. Together, Emily and the man started to devise a plan to stop the cult and their ritual. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they were determined to stop the cult at any cost. As they worked, Emily felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in days. Maybe, just maybe, they could stop the cult and put an end to their sinister plans. But as the days passed, Emily started to feel like she was making progress. She found a group of online researchers who had been tracking the cult for years, and she started to collaborate with them. They shared information and theories, and Emily began to feel like she wasn't alone in her fight. As she worked with the group, Emily uncovered more and more about the cult's activities. She learned about their plans for a ritual that would take place in just a few weeks, and she realized that it was her last chance to stop them. Emily knew that she couldn't do it alone. She had to find someone who could help her take down the cult and stop their sinister plans. And then she remembered the man who had sold her the house. She went through the paperwork she had received when she bought the house, and she found the man's name and address. Emily decided to pay him a visit, hoping that he might have some information that could help her. When she arrived at the man's house, she found him sitting on his front porch, smoking a cigarette. He looked up when she approached, and his eyes widened in surprise. "Emily," he said, clearly taken aback. "What are you doing here?" Emily took a deep breath and explained everything to the man. She told him about the diary, the cult, and her efforts to stop them. The man listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. Finally, when Emily had finished her story, the man spoke. "I know more than you think," he said, his voice low and ominous. "But you need to be careful. The cult is not to be trifled with. They will stop at nothing to achieve their goals." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She realized that she was in even deeper trouble than she had thought. But she also knew that she couldn't give up. She had come too far, and too much was at stake. "I need your help," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I can't do this alone." The man looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll help you," he said. "But we have to be careful. We have to work together, and we have to stay one step ahead of the cult." Emily felt a sense of relief wash over her. She knew that she couldn't do this alone, and she was grateful to have someone on her side. Together, Emily and the man started to devise a plan to stop the cult and their ritual. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they were determined to stop the cult at any cost. As they worked, Emily felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in days. Maybe, just maybe, they could stop the cult and put an end to their sinister plans. With the man's help, Emily began to feel like she had a fighting chance against the cult. They spent hours poring over the diary and the information they had gathered, trying to piece together the cult's plans. As they worked, Emily felt like she was finally making progress. She had a partner in her fight, and together they were uncovering more and more about the cult's activities. But as the days passed, Emily started to feel like they were running out of time. The cult's ritual was fast approaching, and they still didn't have a clear plan for how to stop it. One night, as they were sitting in Emily's living room, poring over the diary, they heard a noise outside. They both froze, listening intently. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate. Emily's heart raced as she realized that the cult had found them. "We have to hide," she whispered to the man. "They can't find us." They crept through the house, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Emily led the way, her heart pounding in her chest. As they reached the back of the house, Emily suddenly stopped. There was a faint light coming from one of the rooms, and she could hear chanting. "They're in the basement," she whispered to the man. "We have to see what they're doing." Together, they crept down the stairs and peered into the basement. What they saw made Emily's blood run cold. The cult members were gathered in a circle, wearing black robes and chanting in a language that Emily didn't recognize. In the center of the circle was a young woman, tied to a table and struggling against her bonds. Emily realized that this was the ritual that the cult had been planning. They were going to sacrifice this young woman to their dark god. "We have to stop them," Emily whispered to the man. "We have to save her." But the man shook his head. "We can't," he said. "There are too many of them, and we don't have any weapons. We have to get out of here and call the police." Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. They turned to leave, but as they did, one of the cult members spotted them. "Stop them," he shouted, and the other cult members turned to face them. Emily and the man ran back up the stairs, but they could hear the cult members following them. They burst through the front door and ran into the night. As they ran, Emily realized that the cult would never stop until they had what they wanted. They had to stop the ritual, no matter what it took. Emily and the man ran through the darkened streets, their hearts pounding with fear. They didn't know where they were going, but they knew they couldn't stay in the house any longer. As they ran, Emily's mind raced. She had to come up with a plan to stop the cult's ritual, but she didn't know how. They were outnumbered and outmatched, and time was running out. Suddenly, the man stopped in his tracks. "I have an idea," he said. "But we're going to need help." He led Emily to a nearby payphone and dialed a number. Emily heard him whispering urgently into the phone, but she couldn't make out what he was saying. When he hung up, he turned to Emily. "Help is on the way," he said. They waited anxiously, their eyes scanning the empty streets for any sign of the cult. Finally, they saw headlights approaching in the distance. A car pulled up, and two men stepped out. Emily didn't recognize them, but the man with her greeted them warmly. "These are friends of mine," he said to Emily. "They can help us." The men introduced themselves as ex-military, and they had the weapons and the expertise to take on the cult. They had been tracking the cult for months, and they knew exactly what they were dealing with. Together, they hatched a plan. The ex-military men would storm the cult's hideout, while Emily and the man would try to rescue the young woman. It was a risky plan, but Emily knew they had no other choice. They had to stop the cult's ritual, no matter what the cost. As they approached the cult's hideout, Emily could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She was terrified, but she knew she had to be brave. The ex-military men stormed the building, guns blazing. Emily and the man crept inside, searching for the young woman. They found her tied to a table, just as they had seen in the basement. Emily quickly untied her, and the three of them ran for the door. But as they reached the door, they saw that the ex-military men were in trouble. The cult members were putting up a fierce fight, and it looked like the ex-military men were outnumbered. Emily knew she had to help. She grabbed a gun from one of the fallen cult members and ran back into the building. The cult members were taken aback by her sudden appearance, and she was able to take them by surprise. She fought bravely, taking down cult members left and right. Finally, the ex-military men emerged victorious. The cult was defeated, and the young woman was safe. But as Emily looked around at the carnage, she realized that the battle was far from over. The cult might be defeated, but their evil still lurked in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. Emily knew that she had to stay vigilant, always on guard against the darkness that threatened to consume her. After the intense battle with the cult, Emily was left shaken and scarred. She couldn't get the image of the young woman strapped to the table out of her head, and the memory of the cult's twisted ritual haunted her dreams. But she didn't have time to dwell on her trauma. She had to help the young woman heal, and she had to make sure the cult wouldn't come back. Emily took the young woman under her wing, making sure she got the medical and emotional care she needed. The young woman was grateful, but she couldn't shake the fear that the cult would come back for her. Emily knew that the cult's influence was still out there, lurking in the shadows. She couldn't let her guard down, not for a moment. Days turned into weeks, and Emily and the young woman started to feel safe again. But then, one night, Emily received a mysterious package in the mail. It was a small, leather-bound book, and it had no return address. Curious, Emily opened the book and started to read. What she found inside made her blood run cold. It was the diary of the previous owner of the house, the one who had been involved in the sinister cult. The diary was filled with horrifying details about the cult's rituals, and Emily realized that the cult's influence had been present in her house long before she even moved in. As she read on, Emily realized that the cult's reach was far wider than she had ever imagined. They had members in high places, people with power and influence who were working to spread the cult's twisted beliefs. Emily knew that she had to act fast. She contacted the ex-military men who had helped her defeat the cult, and together they started to investigate. What they found was even more shocking than they had anticipated. The cult's influence had spread far and wide, and they were using their power to manipulate and control people in positions of authority. She also knew that the darkness would always be out there, waiting to consume anyone who wasn't careful. She would have to stay vigilant, always on guard against the evil that lurked in the shadows, unaware of what tomorrow would hold. I hope you enjoyed this eerie story, and that it kept you on the edge of your seat. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling tales like this one. And don't forget to check out our other videos for more creepy stories, mysterious conspiracies, and spine-tingling mysteries. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.